They took me out to a steakhouse to fire me. Smiled as they called it a transition. What they didn't know was, I'd already seen it coming. I'd been preparing. And when the lights finally went out, every single one of them would remember my name. My name is Derek. I'm 42. And for 11 years, I was the invisible spine of Riverton Manufacturing's entire IT infrastructure. Not that you'd know it from the company website or the quarterly reports or the plaques they gave out at the Christmas party. I wasn't even supposed to be there that long. When I took the job, it was meant to be temporary. Just something to keep my hands busy after my divorce. A stopgap while I figured out what to do with the pieces of a life that had quietly crumbled. But I was good at it. Really good. Somewhere along the line, those machines became mine. Not legally, no. But in every other way that matters. I rebuilt everything layer by layer, from when they were still using Windows XP and storing passwords on sticky notes. I turned a 5-person help desk into a 30-person department that kept 3 separate production facilities running 24/7. The machines don't sleep in Milwaukee. Neither did I. We weren't just tech support. We were the reason Riverton could promise clients their systems would never go down, even when storms hit the grid. We were the last line of defense, and I was the one who built that line. I remember the moment everything shifted. I wasn't in a conference room. I wasn't at a quarterly review. I was at a white tablecloth steakhouse with our CEO, Preston Campbell, slicing into a $70 ribeye. "Derek, you've been invaluable," Preston said between chews. "But we need fresh perspective. Someone with vision for where tech is heading." Translation, we found someone younger, cheaper, someone who won't push back when the board decides to outsource the soul of this place. His name was Nathan Blake. Preston mentioned him casually like a weather report. Harrison's nephew, just finished his master's at MIT. Brilliant kid, specialized in digital transformation. Digital transformation. I took a sip of water and nodded, like a man calmly watching his own execution. "Who's handling the transition?" I asked. Preston looked relieved that I wasn't causing a scene. "You'll have 6 weeks. We'll announce it after the quarterly all-hands." He slid an NDA across the table before dessert arrived. I smiled, signed, shook his hand, and told him I understood. Business decisions. Nothing personal, right? Back at my desk that afternoon, I noticed something subtle. My admin credentials had already been downgraded. My name removed from the leadership email chain. Like I'd never existed. They had decided before that lunch. Probably weeks ago. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just being replaced. I was being mined. 3 months earlier, I'd noticed strange patterns in the server logs. Small unauthorized access attempts. Not from external threats, but from an IP address tied to the executive floor. At first, I thought it was just sloppy internal traffic. But no. Someone was poking around in systems they shouldn't even know existed. Looking at contingency plans. My security protocols. My custom scripts. Even the personal monitoring systems I never documented. They were using me, extracting everything I knew while I smiled and played nice. I thought back to the first time I walked into Riverton's server room. The fluorescent hum. The machines blinking like a living grid. Back then, the network was on the verge of collapse. Patched together with duct tape and prayer. I gave it a nervous system, a pulse. For a while, that made me madder. I didn't have much after the divorce. No kids. No house. I'd followed my ex-wife to Milwaukee after she got into grad school. Left behind a good job in Minneapolis for love. Thinking we'd build something new. 7 years later, I came home one night to find divorce papers on the kitchen counter. "We want different things," she'd written in neat, cruel handwriting. Riverton was my second chance. And now it was being taken from me. The final straw wasn't the firing. It wasn't the access logs. It wasn't even seeing my name deleted like a line of bad code. It was Nathan Blake. 2 days after the lunch, I found myself alone in the server room late at night. The quiet always calmed me. Racks of servers, blinking lights, the cooling system humming like breath. This place was me. And then he walked in. Expensive watch. Perfect posture. A confidence only the truly inexperienced can afford. "Just getting the lay of the land," Nathan said, glancing around like he already owned it. Preston mentioned you'd be showing me around. I smiled. Did he? He complimented my setup. Called it old school but solid. He'd read all my documentation. Had ideas for modernization. What he didn't know was, I'd already made a backup of everything he was about to try and steal. That night, I texted Luis, my most trusted engineer. Coffee, Joe's, 6:30, tomorrow. He replied instantly, I'll be there. By the time I left the building, I already knew. They thought I was done. But I was just getting started. They didn't just replace me. They dissected me. Downloaded every line of code I ever wrote. Like vultures picking at a fresh carcass. But they made one mistake. They thought I'd just hand over what mattered most. They had no idea I'd never documented that part. Luis was already at Joe's when I walked in. Same corner table as always. Hoodie up, half-drunk coffee in front of him. Dark circles under his eyes like shadows that wouldn't leave. He looked up as I sat down. They're phasing me out, I said. No small talk. No soft lead-in. Luis just nodded, slow and tired. Yeah, he said. I figured. He took a deep breath. They've been asking questions. About your systems. Weird ones. Like, do we really need the load balancing setup? And what would happen if we simplified the protocol layers? He looked down. I should have told you. I didn't blame him. Luis had 2 kids, a mortgage, and a wife who made killer enchiladas. He couldn't afford to be on the wrong side of an executive shakeup. What's your plan? He asked. Funny thing was, I didn't realize I had one until he asked. But in that moment, watching people rush past the cafe window, briefcases swinging, tired eyes locked on their phones, it clicked into place like code snapping together. They think everything's in the documentation, I said quietly. But we both know it's not. Luis looked up. The patches I built? I continued. The system sync framework? The live monitoring? It's not in any manual. Not really. Luis leaned in, his voice low. You're not gonna burn it down, are you? No, I said, and I meant it. I'm not going to sabotage anything. But I'm not giving away what's mine either. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. What do you need? I need a copy of every personal project I developed. Every script, every framework I wrote before or outside of Riverton hours. And, he asked, I need to know who's still loyal. The official announcement came a week later. All-hands meeting. Preston at the podium. Fake smile plastered on like a sticker that wouldn't quite stick. Nathan stood beside him, nodding at the right moments like he was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. Derek has been instrumental in building our IT infrastructure, Preston said, not once looking in my direction. And we're grateful for his contributions as he helps us transition to Nathan's leadership over the next 6 weeks. Polite applause. Some people looked shocked. Others just confused. From across the room, Vanessa caught my eye. My right hand for the past 5 years. She mouthed a single word. What? I gave her a tiny nod. She understood. Later that day, I sat in a conference room across from Preston and Diane from HR. I'd like to discuss IP ownership, I said, setting down a thin folder. Preston frowned. Diane blinked. The system sync interface was developed prior to my joining Riverton. I licensed it to the company under a temporary integration clause. It's outlined in my original onboarding agreement. Diane slid a printout across the table. Per company policy, anything developed during employment is company property. Not everything, I replied, calmly flipping to the clause. System Sync was my creation. The enhancements made at Riverton were built on my original proprietary codebase. The licensing was never formally converted to ownership. Preston's jaw tightened. That was 10 years ago, Derek. And I've got emails, I added, where you acknowledged that it was mine. You asked me to integrate it. You promised we'd formalize the agreement once things settled down. Remember? He said nothing. Diane cleared her throat. We'll review the documents. Please do, I said, standing. I'm just protecting what's mine. That night I received an email. Subject: access restricted. Body: your credentials to development servers have been suspended as part of standard transition protocol. Translation: They were trying to lock me out of my own systems. Nathan held a team meeting the next morning. I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway. "Derek," he said, voice full of forced brightness. "Didn't expect you." I leaned against the wall. "Just here to observe." He turned to the whiteboard. "We're going to streamline the main production floor architecture," he announced. "Simplify the protocol stack." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the adaptive load protocols? The ones I built after the 2018 equipment failure?" Nathan's smile faltered. "Yes. Well, modern systems don't need such complicated workarounds." "They're not workarounds," Vanessa interjected from the back. "They're the only reason our hardware hasn't melted under stress testing. Derek engineered those after the whole line went down for 72 hours. Silence. "Well," Nathan said, clearing his throat, "we're moving forward with simplification. Thanks for the input." I left the room without another word. The next morning, legal sent me an email. Subject: ownership clarification. Body: all systems developed during your tenure are considered Rivorton IP. This includes System Sync. We are offering a one-time technology acquisition bonus of $5,000. $5,000 for the backbone of their infrastructure. Later that afternoon, Luis texted me. "Nathan is doing one-on-ones with the team, asking about you, fishing for weak links." That same night, I got a message from one of our longtime vendors. Confused about the new licensing contract. Nathan's team sent us terms from a third-party integration platform. Is System Sync being replaced? I opened the attachment. It was a licensing agreement signed by Preston, transferring our integrations to a startup run by one of Nathan's old classmates. They weren't just replacing me. They were gutting me, selling off everything I'd built like parts from a junked car. That's when I knew. It was time to activate Plan B. The system I built ran silently, flawlessly, like a heartbeat in the walls. But when they tried to rip me out like a tumor, they forgot one thing. I was still wired into its core. And every heartbeat, it beat in my name. I drove to the industrial park where it all started. Back before there was a System Sync. Before Preston knew my name, before any of this became real. Just me, a sketchpad, and a ridiculous dream of turning chaos into code. I parked the car, killed the engine, and sat in silence. The sky was turning gray. The buildings around me were bones, hollowed-out factories from another era. The kind of place you forget exists until it's the only place that remembers you. When I got home that night, I dug through an old storage bin and found it. An ancient black external hard drive. I plugged it into my laptop, held my breath, and waited. There it was. The original System Sync code, dated 8 months before I ever set foot inside Rivorton. The raw framework, the documentation, the early architecture diagrams, all of it. And more importantly, emails. From Preston. From the early days. "Love the System Sync idea. Let's get it running inside the plant. We'll figure out licensing down the road. Just get it integrated for now. Appreciate you doing this on your own time. We'll square it once the board signs off." He never did. They used me, built their future on my foundation. Now they were selling it like a used mattress to the highest bidder. A few days later, Preston called me in. Nathan was there. Diane from HR. Same fake smiles. Same undercurrent of control. "We're accelerating the transition," Preston said. "Your last day will be next Friday. 2 weeks, instead of 6. "Any particular reason?" I asked. "Nathan has demonstrated exceptional capability," Diane said, reading from a script. "And frankly, Derek, your attitude hasn't been conducive to a smooth handover." I looked at Nathan. His eyes didn't meet mine. "And the matter of System Sync?" I asked. "Have you reviewed the original ownership terms?" Preston's voice hardened. "Our legal team has determined all integrated systems fall under Rivorton's umbrella. Your separation package is generous. I suggest you take it." I stood up, calm, controlled. "I'll have my lawyer review everything," I said. "Don't make this difficult," Preston warned. "Oh, I won't," I smiled. "Not at all." That night, I met Luis in the parking lot of a grocery store. He handed me a flash drive. No words, just a nod. What's on it? I asked even though I knew. Everything, he said. Original code bases, deployment logs, authentication keys. I stared at him. Why are you helping me? Luis didn't hesitate. Because they think we're all replaceable. The next few days were a blur of motion. Patent attorneys. I paid out of pocket to file provisional patents on the custom code, adaptive monitoring logic, and vendor integration protocols. Not the whole system sync suite, just the parts that made it work. Enough to legally prove it was mine. Secure server setup. Darren, my old cybersecurity contact, helped me stand up a private server offsite. Encrypted, air-gapped, untouchable. I created a standalone build of system sync. Fully operational. And then I added 3 things. Digital signature verification. The system would scan its own codebase every 12 hours. If it was altered by unauthorized users, it would flag it. Licensing expiration date. Exactly 8 days from that moment, just after my final day, the current instance would lock down. Not crash, not destroy, just quietly pause, waiting for a proper license, a renewal path. If Rivorton signed the license, everything would resume. If they didn't, the system would wait. Cold, quiet, untouchable. Not sabotage, not destruction, just protection. Vanessa pulled me aside Monday morning. They're not handling it well, she whispered. Nathan tried to modify the load protocols. Missed 3 critical alerts. Had to shut down line 3 for 4 hours. My face stayed neutral. 40,000 in lost output, she added. I gave her a sealed envelope. If anything happens, anything, open this, I told her. She didn't ask, just nodded. The email from TechCore Industries came that night. We heard you're transitioning from Rivorton. Would love to discuss mutual business interests. Available for a meeting? TechCore, the company buying Rivorton. They were hedging their bets. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and called their VP. Let's meet, I said. After I leave officially. Thursday afternoon, Nathan called me in. Some team members say you've been acting strangely, he said. Anything I should know about? Just focused on wrapping things up, I replied. We're changing all system passwords after you're gone. Standard procedure. Smart, I said, though it won't affect System Sync's core functions. That's the beauty of it. He froze. Meaning, it's designed to be resilient. Works regardless of admin changes. He didn't know if I was bluffing. I wasn't. Friday morning, I turned in my badge, signed the paperwork, declined the awkward send-off lunch. At 9:17 a.m. Monday, I knew what was coming, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. At 9:17 a.m., everything stopped. Not the lights, not the power, the pulse, the heartbeat I'd kept alive for over a decade. And in its silence, they finally heard my voice, because without me, there was no us left. Monday morning, I didn't set an alarm. At 9 a.m., I was in my kitchen, barefoot, sipping coffee. By 9:17, the first production line at Rivorton stopped cold. At 9:20, the second line stalled. By 9:45, all 3 of Rivorton's manufacturing facilities were dead silent, blinking, frozen ghosts of a system that once breathed life into steel. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Preston Campbell. I let it buzz for 4 rings before answering. Derek, what the hell did you do? His voice was taut with panic, trying, and failing to sound in control. I didn't do anything, I said, slowly stirring my coffee. System Sync's license expired. As designed. You sabotaged the company. I kept my voice level. No, I protected my property. There's a renewal path if you're interested. This is extortion. It's business, I replied, echoing the same icy tone Preston used when he slid that NDA across the table weeks ago. Clause 7 of our original integration agreement. You remember, right? The one that specifically referred to System Sync as licensed, not purchased. He didn't respond. I've already sent the new licensing terms to your legal department, I continued. They're very fair. Recognition of ownership, proper compensation, NDA. That's it. You'll never work in this industry again, he hissed. I smiled. I just got off a call with TechCore. You might want to check with them before making threats. Click. The next 48 hours were a corporate meltdown. I didn't need access to Riverton's systems to see it. I had people on the inside. Vanessa texted me midday. Nathan's panicking. Production's still down. Legal scrambling. Luis messaged at midnight. Nathan tried restoring from backup. License check still fails. They're cooked. By Wednesday afternoon, my lawyer received the signed licensing agreement. It was everything I'd asked for, and nothing more. Ownership confirmed. Compensation wired. And most importantly, a non-disclosure clause about the circumstances of my departure. Riverton didn't want the world knowing that the guy they let go held the keys to their entire infrastructure. 3 days later, I was in a glass-walled conference room 37 floors above the city, sitting across from the vice president of operations at TechCore Industries. They were still acquiring Riverton, but everything had changed. We'd like to bring you on, he said, sliding a sleek contract across the table. Lead the technical integration as a consultant, not an employee. Full flexibility. Double your Riverton salary. No office hours. Your terms. I looked him in the eye. What about Nathan? I asked. He didn't flinch. Mr. Blake will be pursuing other opportunities. I signed the contract. 2 weeks later, Luis called me. They let him go. Nathan Blake, MIT Golden Boy, Harrison's nephew, the fresh perspective, had been quietly removed from his position. No farewell lunch. No corporate memo. Just a one-line update on the org chart. Nathan Blake, status. Departed. The official reason was vague. The real reason: 3 of Riverton's largest clients had threatened to pull their contracts. The system failures during Nathan's streamlining debacle shook their confidence. And they weren't buying the idea that the issue was technical. Because it wasn't. It was personal. Preston remained as CEO, on paper. But when TechCore finalized the acquisition, his new title was more decoration than authority. No real team. No say in technical matters. Just a window office far away from any meeting that mattered. He got what he wanted. A golden parachute, a title, and a nameplate. But his power? I took that with me. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. Just certain. There's a quiet kind of vindication that comes from knowing your value, even when the people around you tried to pretend it didn't exist. Riverton didn't fall apart because I left. It fell apart because it never respected the thing that kept it alive. They treated me like an appendage. But I was the bloodstream. With my first consulting check, I put a down payment on a small lake cabin just north of the city. Nothing flashy. Just peace. A wraparound deck. Morning fog curling off the water. The kind of silence that doesn't make you feel alone but whole. A month later, Vanessa joined my consulting team. Then Luis. Eventually, half my old department jumped ship. Not under me. With me. As partners. Equals. We didn't rebuild Riverton. We built something better. Almost a year later, I ran into Preston. It was at a restaurant downtown. One of those places where deals get made over $28 martinis and overpriced tuna tartare. He saw me. Started to turn. Then stopped. Walked over to my table. You won, he said quietly. No fight left in his voice. I looked up at him. Really looked. His suit was still expensive. But the eyes? The eyes were tired. Grayed out. Older than I remembered. It wasn't about winning, I said. It was about value. Knowing what you're worth. He nodded once. Then walked away. They cast me out like I was disposable. But exile can be freedom in disguise. I didn't just walk away from their crumbling castle. I started building a kingdom of my own. And this time I wasn't asking for permission to lead. After everything collapsed, after the emails stopped and the adrenaline faded, I expected to feel triumphant. But mostly, I just felt tired. I spent the first few days in silence. No meetings, no servers, no emergency calls at 2 a.m. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't tethered to a blinking dashboard. Just me, my laptop, and a cabin overlooking the water. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit on the deck as the sun slid across the lake like light on code. Clean, simple, and perfect. And in those quiet mornings, something strange happened. I started to think again. Not react. Not defend. Not strategize. Think. For years, I'd been surviving. Now I was finally building. The consulting work with TechCore came fast and heavy. At first, it was about integrating Riverton systems, rescuing what could be salvaged, gutting what couldn't. Nathan had left behind a mess. Half-documented architecture, scrambled protocols, rushed patches that looked like duct tape on broken glass. They needed me, and not just for cleanup. They needed someone who understood not just code, but systems. Real systems. Living ones. The kind with moving parts, human users, real-world chaos. I didn't just fix Riverton's bones. I gave TechCore a nervous system. One that could scale. One that learned. I brought Vanessa on first. No pitch, no contract. Just a message. Want to build something real? She said yes within 10 minutes. Then came Luis. Then May from QA. Then Chris, our quiet genius from data security. One by one, they joined. Not under a banner. Not under my name. But as equals. We weren't building a company. We were building a philosophy. We called it Sentinel Dynamics. It wasn't flashy. No venture capital. No launch party. Just word of mouth, clean code, and bulletproof delivery. Our motto: systems should work for people, not the other way around. The first few clients were small manufacturers, people who'd heard about that guy who saved Riverton. They didn't want off-the-shelf platforms. They wanted something tailored, real. We gave it to them. By the end of the first quarter, we were turning down work. By the end of the second, we had contracts with 3 Fortune 100s. No investors. No board. Just sweat and integrity. One night, Luis and I sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the lake go still. "I ever tell you," he said. "I thought you'd just walk away?" "From what?" I asked. "From all of it. The betrayal. The mess. I thought you'd disappear." I sipped my beer and smiled. "I did. Then I built something better." He laughed. "You didn't just survive, man. You leveled up." Somewhere in the middle of all this, I started going back through my old notebooks. The ones I'd buried during the Riverton years. There were sketches in there for things I hadn't even had the time to attempt. Autonomous load balancing for hybrid cloud manufacturing. Predictive diagnostic overlays that learned from operator behavior. Even a real-time vendor integrity scoring system. At Riverton, those ideas would have been cool, but not in the budget. At Sentinel, they became our next flagship product. But success doesn't erase scars. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, expecting my phone to buzz with an outage. Sometimes I'd open a file and instinctively wonder if Nathan had messed with the code. And sometimes, when I saw a young engineer second-guess themselves in a meeting, I'd hear Preston's voice in my head, smooth and smiling. "We need someone with vision." For months, I'd internalized the idea that I was too old, too slow, that my way was outdated, my knowledge obsolete. But every time a new client told me, "This is exactly what we needed," I took that voice and buried it just a little deeper. One day I got a letter, not an email, a real, physical envelope, from a supplier I hadn't heard from in years. "We've ended our contract with Riverton. They've outsourced everything to some faceless third-party integrator. But we wanted to thank you. The tools you built helped us survive the last recession. If you ever start something new, we'd like to be your first client." That letter still sits in a frame above my desk. Not because of the flattery, but because it reminded me of something Preston and Nathan never understood. The work we do matters. Not the headlines. Not the awards. The work. 1 year to the day after my final moment at Riverton, I went back. Not to the building. To the park. That bench by the lake where I first sketched out System Sync. I sat there, opened my laptop, and pulled up a dashboard Sentinel's client uptime record. 99.997%. Better than anything I'd ever hit at Riverton. Better than anything they could have imagined. And all built by a team of people they said weren't good enough. They thought stripping me of my title would erase my name. But titles fade. Legacies don't. And long after the applause dies and the plaques tarnish, people remember who actually built the damn thing. I never planned on running into Preston again. But fate or irony has a strange sense of timing. It was late fall. The city was in full coat and coffee mode, and I just wrapped a lunch meeting with a potential client from overseas. I was walking through the lobby of one of those polished downtown hotels, the kind with echoing marble floors and glass chandeliers, when I saw him, Preston Campbell, standing near the concierge desk, checking his watch, looking smaller. Not physically. He still had the tailored suit, the polished shoes, the expensive cologne. But the weight he once carried, the gravity that used to tilt entire rooms in his direction, was gone. He was just a man in a suit now. He saw me, paused. We made eye contact, and for a moment, I thought he'd turn and walk the other way. But he didn't. He walked toward me. "You won," he said. No preamble, no false charm, just 3 words. I looked at him, really looked. The lines around his eyes were deeper now. His shoulders hunched ever so slightly. The confident predator had been replaced by something else. Not broken, just hollow. "I wasn't trying to win," I replied, and I meant it. "It was never about beating you, or Rivorton. It was about value, knowing what I'm worth, refusing to let you decide that for me." He nodded, once, quietly. Then he turned and walked away. No apology, no acknowledgement. But for the first time, I didn't need one. I'd already moved on. Back at the cabin that evening, I watched the lake breathe under the silver light. Sentinel had just finalized a partnership with a German robotics firm, our biggest international deal yet. Vanessa was flying out next week to lead the integration. Luis was presenting at a global conference in Tokyo. Me? I was home. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't chasing anything. No titles, no promotions, no validation, just impact. I thought about all the titles I'd worn over the years. IT director, lead architect, backbone of the company. But none of them meant anything once they took away the access badge and deleted my name from the org chart. Because I was never just a title. I was the code, the structure, the resilience. I was the guy who stayed when systems crashed, who worked through the blackout, who missed birthdays and holidays so production wouldn't halt. They took the desk. They took the office. They even tried to take the system, but they couldn't take what it meant. Sometimes when I'm feeling nostalgic or when I want to remind myself how far I've come, I open the archived version of System Sync, the original, the one that still carries my fingerprints in every line of logic. I don't run it. I just look at the naming conventions, the modules, the flow I designed late at night when I was sleeping on my brother's couch, wondering if I'd ever matter again. And I smile, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. These days, young developers reach out on LinkedIn. They've heard of me, seen Sentinel's work, want to learn. I don't tell them about the politics, or the betrayals, or the steakhouse lunch that ended my decade-long run. I tell them the one thing I've learned that matters. Don't confuse your job with your value. You are not your title. You are not your salary. You are not your manager's opinion of you. You are what you build, what you protect, what you leave behind. That's your legacy. We held our first Sentinel offsite last month. 27 people. No suits, no org chart, just whiteboards, fire pits, and ideas. Vanessa ran a breakout session on human-centered design. Luis demoed a prototype for our next-generation deployment tool. I grilled burgers, listened, watched. At one point, someone tapped a glass to make a toast. "To Derek," they said, "for showing us that the system isn't broken. It's just built by the wrong people." I laughed, thanked them. But in my head, I thought, the system will always be broken. That's why we keep building better ones. This isn't a revenge story. Not really. It's a reclamation of dignity, of identity, of value. The day Rivorton let me go, they thought they were cutting costs. What they really did was set me free. And what I built in that freedom is bigger than anything they ever imagined.